every sentence entirely by itself. Take that sentence out of the rest of the story and assess whether it, out of context, might be defamatory. You're used to reading it all together, and it makes sense, and what was said before, what comes after, makes it seem better. But you have to look at the words all by themselves. You know, he paid a bribe, and you know, and that is defamatory. It can be defended against if you have evidence that he really paid a bribe, but you really have to look at those few words on their own.
Exactly, exactly. So the mandatory steps, 3 steps, facts. When I'm talking about facts, I mean names, graphics, statements, and so on. Also facts coming from the quotes from the interviewees. Everything should be verified. The conclusions. A story, an investigative story without conclusions is an investigative story without an edge. If you want to make impact, you have to make a conclusion of all the research, all the material you have gathered. How far can you go? Sometimes we have to soften the conclusions, but sometimes we can make them sharper. Can we say bribery or not bribery, for example? And of course, the allegations. All allegations should be answered to, or at least we should make it clear that the subject of the investigation has had several opportunities to answer to those allegations. Not only A, B, and D, but also C. Then the reporter says about the criticism C. That's not much of criticism, maybe a little bit critical, but he doesn't have the answer to that. Yes, he has the answer to that, because otherwise he will use this against us, and it will blow out of proportions. And when it comes to verifying, it's also very important to verify even the seemingly harmless facts, because every mistake you make can be used against you, and it will be used against you.
I don't want to interrupt, but I want just, are you, because we have 15 minutes left.
Yeah, two pictures.
2 pictures.
Yeah.
Beautiful pictures.
3 pictures. 2.
2.
Maybe 4. No.
2.
We use footnotes, just a good way to make it efficient. Footnotes to links to websites or to documents in a laptop or in the cloud. So, finally, being fair and generous. Just one more thing. If there are any mitigating circumstances, something that speaks for the bad guy, why not include it in the story? In fact, it will probably make a better story, a more compelling story, if you make a human being of the bad guy. We tend to demonize the bad guy and make him without any human qualities. Now the reporter can sleep well, not be worried. The reporter knows that the editors are staying in front of the reporter, because now the editors are responsible for that the story is bulletproofed, and in front of the editors I am standing. The reporter can sleep well. And if you want our manuals, you can find it on the website for this conference. And here is my contact.
Thanks very much. So the 3 panelists will answer questions if you have them. If not, we have another idea to get you to talk. Any questions? Sir.
What does the law say about the matter of which is sub judice? You know, sometimes there is a case in the court and it's being framed against somebody, and the case is going on, and then as a reporter you get some alternative facts which actually don't match with whatever is being happening in the court. So what happens? The subject is sub judice. So you have new facts in your hands. Can you write? What happens? What does the law say?
Yes, it's that. Thank you.
What country are you from? I'm sorry? Okay. I don't know. I actually think you do have court reporting restrictions. I know India does, a number of countries do, so you'd have to find out from your jurisdiction whether or not there is court reporting restrictions. So in the UK, in Hong Kong, and a variety of other common law countries, while a case is pending, particularly if there is a jury going on, you cannot report about anything that you've independently found out. Otherwise, you will be held in contempt of court. You could be jailed. The case could blow up. And so on. So there have been cases, for example, on a sex abuse case, but the prosecutor doesn't bring up a prior criminal record of the defendant. And then the journalist says, oh, I found out, you know, he was involved in 2 other pedophile cases, reported that. The case ended up collapsing, and then the journalist was prosecuted, and the newspaper had to pay a hefty fine. So this is what I'm talking about, media law literacy. You need to know what are the specific laws in your particular country, because they will be enforced.
Another question?
Yes.
Niels, when do you not send the story to the bad guy?
I can give an example. We made an interview last year with the Prime Minister of Iceland. We made a setup against him, and we said we want to talk to him about his success when it comes to the finances of Iceland. And he was happy to make an interview with the Swedish television and Mission Investigative. He might suspect something. He should have. I don't know. But anyhow, that was a setup, because then the interview was a method to get evidence. And his reaction to the questions we asked when we asked him about his money invested in tax haven, his secret company in tax haven, and when he got those questions, he totally collapsed.
That's the former prime minister, right?
So, and he became a former prime minister.
So
that was the opposite of transparency and openness, but sometimes you have to be very secretly.
We haven't gotten into legal issues about going undercover, hiding your identity. In this case, they didn't hide their identities. They just had a pretext for the interview. We had a case in the United States where people who called themselves journalists were prosecuted for forging identification cards, I think driver's licenses, in order to go in and do an undercover interview of a Planned Parenthood clinic, I believe. But there's a range of issues that I think other panels have dealt with as far as the ethics and legality of certain practices like going undercover. So just to flag those. Now, Doreen had an idea. I'll hand her the mic.
So for those unlucky souls who raised their hand when I said, have you ever been sued? I think I counted 8 or 9. Have you ever faced any criminal charges? Could any of you talk about your particular case in which you learned something from that lawsuit or from the prosecution, or something that you were working on that you feared that you might be sued? Anyone? Yes.
Hi, my name is Naziha. I'm from Pakistan. Last year, I worked on a story about this massive housing development coming up on the outskirts of Karachi. And this housing development, basically, it was essentially based on this huge land grab. It was like a 22,000-acre housing development that was coming up. And the company behind it is owned by a man who's supposedly the biggest land grabber in all of South Asia. There are over 100 charges of murder against him, but nobody touches him. He's hugely powerful, enormously well-connected. So anyway, we did the story, and right at the end, contrary to what Niels is saying, we sent him a list of questions. Well, I won't say right at the end, but we gave him enough time. And they didn't get back to us. We tried to contact them repeatedly. They didn't get back to us. And what happened instead was 48 hours later, we got a court, a legal notice saying that you cannot publish anything defamatory about whatever this issue was. And you can imagine, we found out later they actually were trying to get a gag order, but the court said that they cannot issue a gag order. All they can do is say that there shouldn't be anything defamatory put in the public domain. Anyway, we went ahead with the story, and sure enough, they sued us. And but you know, when our lawyers appeared in court, they keep pushing the date further ahead because we had everything backed up with, I mean, literally everything. So from that instance, I learned how important it is to, you know, especially when it's an issue you're taking up really, taking on really powerful individuals, you have to be that much more careful that you really have bulletproofed your story. So yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And again, looking at who your target is, they know that they can't win this case. It doesn't matter. That they still will bring the case, try to scare you off from the story, but fortunately you did your homework and had the proper story.
Doreen didn't ask how many people have received cease and desist orders, letters. I imagine many, if not all of you, have at one point gotten a letter from a lawyer representing a source or a subject of a story and telling you that you had to stop, you couldn't print, so forth. And obviously, that's not the end of it. Best, as Lucy said, to have your own lawyer deal with that. But I think in some instances I've seen, it's proved to be an opportunity to do further investigating through the lawyer and turn that lawyer's threat into more information.
Very good. And what happened when you had the cease and desist order? Did that stop you from doing the story?
No, it became an interesting fact in the story.
That's good. Anyone else care to share their story? Yes, up there. Can you get the microphone up?
I'm actually a lawyer as well, but I deal a lot with the media in Botswana. Ours was the Directorate of Corruption has a provision in their legislation which says that no one can reveal names, facts, etc. about an ongoing investigation without the permission of the Directorate. But there's no way a journalist would know if the investigation that they're working on is something that is being worked on by the anti-corruption unit. And you can't exactly be saying, well, I'm investigating Mr. Salbany. Are you investigating him by any chance? So the newspaper ran an article on a minister who was involved in some corrupt oil deals. And the DCEC came and raided that newspaper. The newspaper called me as the lawyer. I refused to allow them entry into the premises because the provisions under which they were citing, that they were referring to, didn't fall into the charge that they were claiming. So the warrant was defective. We then delayed them and delayed them. We asked for them to go get a new warrant, but this time not ex parte, not on their own, but serve us, because we are now aware that they wanted the warrant. They disappeared. They came back with the warrant. It was now after dark. The warrant didn't specify that they could enter after dark, so I refused to allow them again. The following morning, the warrant was still defective, and they arrested me. They arrested myself and the editor, the journalist, and the publisher. So it was the four of us. But I was the only one that was put in a cell. The others were kept in a very nice room under arrest, but told that, you see, now your lawyer has been dealt with, now you can talk to us.
Well,
did they talk?
No, they didn't, because I had arranged already. But the point is that the lack of support generally from outside was was intimidating. The journalists have been extremely supportive. I subsequently had to leave Botswana after being there for 25 years. My permits were cancelled, etc., etc. But the support from the journalists have been fantastic. But otherwise, people are terrified. So there's no way that, there's no means to be able to push back. And then the additional problem that we have is that as a country, Botswana is perceived as this light of democracy. It's the bastion of hope in Africa. So when you speak to people about these things and some of the problems that are being faced by the media in Botswana, which are increasing, it is, no, sorry, that doesn't happen in Botswana. But we're also defending cases of sedition in Botswana.
We're a minute away from completion. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm
sorry, I just wanted to know whether Lucy's
I was about to... yes, so a big theme of this whole conference has been how investigative journalists can help each other, collaborate on stories and so forth. And I wanted to ask Lucy, from the point of view of defending investigative journalists, does it help to have other investigative journalists aware and involved, or does it cause more trouble? How can you help each other when one of you gets into legal trouble?
Thanks. Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for your intervention, because I think that really highlights all the different layers of the challenges that you face and all the different processes that you need to go through to ensure publication and to ensure the safety of the whole team that it takes to get these stories out, and the critical importance of having a lawyer there to fight at every stage to kind of get that pushback, because those little pockets of time, each time you can delay the raid, each time you can delay the detention, or each time you can get them out of detention quick enough, are really key to publishing the story. But also, you know, once we're talking about detention, we're talking about a violation of all sorts of other rights. We have torture cases, we have unlawful detention. There's very serious things that can happen and that can escalate. So it's thanks to lawyers like this around the world who are really stepping in and helping. In terms of the relationship as from journalists to each other, there are kind of different levels that you can support. Obviously, if you're aware that a journalist has been arrested, is being silenced, is being threatened, is being harassed, you have an audience and a mouthpiece and a way of getting that information out there and getting people aware of the case, which can be so important and so helpful. We've talked a lot today about the legal protection for journalists, but there is the whole political and advocacy and campaigning side of it, which is so important. So if you know that this is happening, to cover the arrests, to cover the harassment in your own stories, to follow it, it puts pressure on the individuals who are trying to silence the journalist, and it makes it harder for them to silence a journalist or to use the law to act in their own interest. There's also quite proactive ways. We touched on it a bit before with the cybercrimes legislation, but you can be more proactive in making sure that the space that you have to operate as a journalist is broad enough and wide enough for you to be able to do your job and for other journalists to be able to do their job. So when you see these new pieces of legislation being discussed, coming out, understanding them, talking about them, getting that into the public discussion is so critical, because they have very sweeping provisions and sweeping powers that are going to end up silencing people. So if you can get ahead of it and like set the stage and set the ground so that you have a space to operate in, that's a very important one. And I think thirdly, there is some perhaps more direct information sharing that can be being done when we were talking about and analyzing the risk that if you, for example, let somebody know that you're going to publish a story about them so that you can get their response. If they can't, if there's no point silencing you because they know someone else might publish, or that they know someone else is involved and it's not just you as a single individual doing it, then that can also help your situation.
Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone. I'm told to remind you that tomorrow at 9 o'clock there is a media law clinic. Doreen, Lucy, and someone else will be there to meet with you if you wish one-on-one. to get on-the-spot free legal guidance. We won't say advice because that sounds too serious. So if you want to hear more from lawyers tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and thank you very much, Niels, Lucy, Doreen.